Have you ever opened up Google Street View in Europe? Well, if not, give it a try, because there's a pretty curious picture that emerges. Virtually the entire continent is covered in the blue lines that indicate Street View is available, but Germany and Austria are almost entirely blank. Yeah, what's up with that? Well, way back in August of 2010, Google announced that it would map the streets of Germany's 20 biggest cities by the end of that year. And the outrage was enormous. Some of Google's camera cars were vandalized, and a 70-year-old Austrian who didn't want his picture taken actually threatened the driver of one with a garden pick. And this is really curious. I mean, if Germany and Austria are among the world's most advanced economies, why do Google's camera cars find these countries inaccessible and inhospitable to one of the most frequently used Google applications? Well, the story, or lack thereof, is actually quite interesting and involves data protection privacy laws that date back nearly 60 years. But could that all be changing? Well, let's take a look. Yeah, it's hard to believe that Google Street View has been around for 16 years now. After launching in several cities in the United States, San Francisco, New York, Las Vegas, Miami, and Denver, on May 25th in 2007. The cameras at the time produced 2.8 megapixel images, which is significantly less than new smartphones on the market today. But 13 years is a pretty long time in terms of technology. In fact, the first generation of the iPhone was released 1 month after Street View on the 29th of June in 2007. And since then, Google's fleet of 360 camera cars have gone from this to this. And with the addition of aerial drones and on-foot trekkers, they have captured some interesting images from locations around the world, producing photos that not only let us go back in time, but also offer up a bit of comedic gold, and even solving crimes. Seriously. So fast forward to today, and there are now over 220 billion Street View images from over 100 countries and territories, allowing people to fully experience what it's like to be in these places right from their phone or computer. And Street View doesn't just help you virtually explore, it's also critical to our mapping efforts, letting you see the most up-to-date information about the world, while also laying the foundation for a more immersive and intuitive map. But those incredible distances include very little kilometers actually logged right here in Germany. Because despite Street View featuring places as far off the beaten path as the International Space Station, gas extraction platforms in the North Sea, and the coral reefs of Indonesia, you probably aren't going to find a Street View of most residential areas right here within Germany. In fact, Germany's Minister for Consumer Protection at the time called Google's, quote, comprehensive photo offensive a million-fold violation of the private sphere. She went on to state, there's not a secret service in existence that would collect photos so unabashedly. But in an era of ever-advancing digitalization, why exactly are Germans and Austrians so camera shy? For the history buffs among us, you're probably likely to see the German resistance to Google Street View as just simply a continuation of a long-fought battle over autonomy and privacy. After all, Germans carry the trauma of not one, but two totalitarian systems in their recent past, the fascist Third Reich and the communist East Germany. Both of these regimes wanted total control over their citizens. In the Nazi years, the state's blunt instrument was called the Gestapo, short for the Geheime Staatspolizei, or the Street State Police. In East Germany, it was the Stasi, short for Staatssicherheit, or state security. In both systems, citizens effectively ceased to have a right to privacy and could be branded as criminals for private thoughts or acts, resulting in severe punishment. So, as with many other aspects of the Nazi regime, post-war Germany resolved Nie Wieder, or never again, when it came to violations of privacy. And I can't help but think that's one of the reasons why the very first article of the then only West Germany's post-war constitution read, "Human dignity shall be inviolable. To respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authority." And with the advent of the internet era, this fierce protection of privacy, particularly online, has actually led to some pretty remarkable laws and protections. Ones that have actually inspired international law and pretty much set the bar in terms of Datenschutz, or data protection. In fact, in 1970, the German state of Hesse passed the first data protection law in the world. This was followed up in 1979 when West Germany laid the foundation for the Bundesdatenschutzgesetz, or the Federal Data Protection Act. In the 1980s, citizens here actually successfully sued the government over a census questionnaire, so detailed that it would allow the government to identify individuals. The court recognized German citizens' right to, quote, informational self-determination, and actually blocked the sharing of any personal information without any government agency or cooperation. In March 2010, the German Federal Constitutional Court actually overturned a law that allowed the authorities to store phone and email data for up to 6 months for security reasons, as, quote, a grave intrusion of personal privacy rights. And in May of 2018, the EU adopted the General Data Protection Regulation, which follows the German model of data discretion rather than the laxer American one. And interestingly, such laws might actually be a pretty good template for US lawmakers, because currently we kind of have a hodgepodge of de facto regulations. California's regulation is probably the closest thing we have to the EU GDPR. But even outside of their state's legislation, most American businesses have already had to adapt to the GDPR because they could reasonably have someone within the EU access their site. And many companies have internalized a lot of these practices and acknowledged their advantages for themselves and their clients. As we just explored, foreign firms operating in Germany have had to adapt to some of the strictest data privacy protection laws in the world. And quite honestly, that's probably a pretty good thing. But truth be told, the mentality of Nie Wieder is difficult to maintain in a world that increasingly mines and monetizes data.
And we use Facebook as a means to gather data.
As a result, the advancement of digitalization is viewed with a mixture of fatalism and misgiving. And oftentimes this presents itself in curious contradictions here in Germany. For starters, I think it's a pretty fair thing to say that Germans kind of have a split personality when it comes to social media. Yes, Germans are instinctively distrustful of big tech companies such as Google and Facebook. Meanwhile, Google has cornered more than 90% of the search engine market here in Germany, and close to half of all Germans do in fact have a Facebook account. Although, to be fair, I will say that most of my German colleagues and German friends who do have a Facebook account will usually use an alias. They won't use their legal name on their Facebook account. And actually, we usually get at least one email a week from somebody who would prefer to leave their comment in an email than to type it down below in the comment section here, because YouTube is owned by Google. But the second example that has probably surprised me the most is that despite the forward march of digitalization, privacy still trumps efficiency here in Germany. While Germany's macro economy relies on high tech to maintain its global pole position, good old-fashioned cash is still king on a microeconomic level. In 2016, 80% of all point-of-sale transactions in Germany were made in notes and coins, rather than via credit card. But in their neighbor of the Netherlands, it was just 46%. In fact, Americans, Brits, Danes, or Swedes can go for months without handling cash. But in Germany, particularly in some areas even here in the Black Forest, you wouldn't last a day. But again, if there's one thing Germans value even more than efficiency, it's, you guessed it, privacy. But I am curious about how much longer their culture can reasonably hold out. Health authorities, doctors' offices, and universities still rely on fax machines. And it's not uncommon to find towns that offer few or none of their services online. It's just the reality of living in Germany in 2023. I mean, here we are, nearly 10 years after German Chancellor Angela Merkel was famously ridiculed for referring to the internet as, quote, uncharted territory. And yet my vaccination records are still paper records that I have to carry with me to the doctor's office. So yeah, I mean, I get it. From an outsider's perspective looking in, Germany seems to be pretty far behind on the train of digitalization, where even their more immediate neighbors seem to be much more further advanced, leading to what can be argued as some pretty significant benefits. But you know, approaching this topic as an American, I do find wildly interesting because there are some interesting cultural differences at play. I would argue that in the United States, we might more fiercely protect bodily privacy, whereas in Germany, it has much more to do with online privacy. And let me explain. For example, public nudity is a big no-no in the United States, and the policing of women's bodies in particular is quite strict. I've shared before that I grew up in a pretty conservative part of the United States, and I remember on one specific occasion, we were going to have a pool party in the summer for my Christian church youth group, and the only way they would let that party happen is if all of the girls would agree to wear an extra large, non-white t-shirt on top of our bathing suits so that we wouldn't expose any body part in front of the boys. But on the other hand, here in Germany, you guys have a long tradition of what is known as Freikörperkultur, or free body culture. Certain beaches and areas of city parks are dedicated to nude sunbathing, and even Nachtwanderung, or nude rambling, is a thing here. And I won't lie, when I first moved to Freiburg, I was pretty shocked the first time I walked down the Dreisam in the summer and saw all of these parents just completely strip their kids nude naked and let them run and splash around in the water in the public river. Because that would never happen in the United States, certainly not in such a public venue. But you know, on the other hand, as we've discussed in this video, Germans are extremely possessive of their personal data. In general, the Germans I've met are typically quite shocked by the readiness with which Americans and others share their names, addresses, friend lists, and purchase histories online. So if we turn back to our discussion on Google Street View, you know, honestly, even if they were allowed to map more of Germany, there are still measures you could take to reasonably protect your autonomy and privacy. Google automatically blurs faces and vehicle license plates and, upon request, the fronts of your house. Although, to be fair, very few actually take this step. According to Google, in the mapped areas they have done in Germany, only 3% of households in the relevant neighborhoods actually requested their houses to be blurred. But I do think it's really important that we're able to hold these companies to be accountable, particularly when they possess so much information, as well as power and influence. Understandably, the Austrians were outraged following the revelation in May 2010 that Google had used data from unencrypted Wi-Fi connections when collating its roadside panoramas, and they subsequently banned Street View from their country. Granted, in 2017, Google has resumed collecting imagery in Austria, and from 2018, it is now available in selected localities. But again, as younger generations become more familiar with the transactional aspect of their personal data, perhaps German attitudes toward data privacy will start shifting significantly towards the American model. All right, guys, so I actually think that's a perfect spot to wrap up today's video. But before I let you go, I would love to hear from you guys down in the comment section about your thoughts on Google Street View specifically. Because I'll be honest, personally, I really like it. When I used to live in the United States, before I would go to a new place, I like to look at it on Google Street View and make sure I knew what the building looked like, or check out what the parking situation looked like so I could plan better. I'm very much a type A personality here with that for sure. But I also love the fact that now that we have all of this information collected over time, in some cities, Google is now allowing you to look back in time, to go back 10, 15 years and actually experience how urban environments change and shift. And I think that could be such a really cool, teachable tool from like an academic perspective. I think that's one of the positive benefits of this technology, but I fully recognize that with that kind of access and power also comes an incredible amount of responsibility. So please let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed what you saw today, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And for more content from the Black Forest family, hit that subscribe button. So I'll see you next Sunday. Tschüss!